What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Go Long Podcast. I'm here in Eagan, Minnesota, with fellow Substacker, a man who deserves some credit for nudging me into the Substack world, I must say. And if you just listen to the jingle there on the intro, this is his handiwork. Matthew Coller of Purple Insider. If you're looking for Minnesota Vikings coverage, work your way over to Purple Insider. Download the podcast everywhere you pod. It's exceptional. You will learn plenty, and you've helped me learn plenty about technical support when it comes to these podcasts as well. So this is obviously Matt's equipment. It's probably why we sound so good, right?
Well, yeah, I am actually a little nervous because I feel like if we screw this up technical wise, then I can't make fun of you as much for all of your miscues along the way. But no, I am thrilled to see how much Go Long has grown and exploded, and I see you everywhere now. So it's great to see it. I'm glad to have you here, man. I know that something's going on with the Minnesota Vikings if you are here in Minnesota because there's not that many easy flights from Buffalo to Minnesota. I'm very aware of this. So you got to make a real effort to come out here. You're here. Why are you here?
I'll
5-0? Why you never visit when they're 1-5?
You're right.
The last few years, I never see you.
Well, like many, I picked the Vikings to finish last, and here they are in first, sculling their way toward the Super Bowl, and figured, you know what, let's figure out what the hell's going on out here in Minnesota. You know, there is a direct flight now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
very useful.
I got direct out and direct back, baby. Yeah.
It was not like that for several years. Like where I think right after kind of COVID and stuff, they limited some of the flights, and I had to fly to like Charlotte and then up to Buffalo if I was going home to visit my family. But I maybe won't be able to go visit them until after February with the way that things are going. So, do you want to know why? Do you want to know why they're this good? Is that why you're here?
I was going to go on a rant about people who deplane out of order. You're keeping me on track though, so that's probably for the best. I had another budger here, and it's probably somebody from Minneapolis. Can't be somebody from Buffalo because I would like to think Buffalonians know how to deplane in an orderly, row by row fashion. Is this one of your friends that nudged ahead of me? And
well, the thing is that most people who are arriving in Minneapolis are then going somewhere else because this airport takes people everywhere. So I'm guessing it was more of a pushy Buffalonian who was headed to LA or somewhere like that. But I have had this many times. The plane lands, you're just sitting there, somebody jumps up, they run forward, they get in everybody else's way, and you get what, 3 or 4 or 5 seats ahead? Well, congratulations to you. Even if you're late for a connecting flight, that's not going to change your fate by very much if you just stay patient and wait. So I have the same issue. People reclining in front of you.
That should be a federal offense as well.
People who take their socks off. Like there's a lot of different.
What the hell is taking their socks off?
Oh, I've seen it. I've had people next to me take their shoes and socks off, and it's in the movie
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yep. But I have had that happen. One time I was sitting there and someone put their foot up, and it was kind of like right behind me, a foot. Like, that is the last thing that I want for 3 hours while I'm flying. But it's
fungus
stuff out there. I didn't observe the foot.
You didn't.
Make too many observations.
You were too busy smelling the foot. Yeah. A little trick though. I mean, because I'm kind of moving off of shopping carts. I think I've really, beat that dead horse into oblivion.
Well, I used to work at a grocery store, so I appreciate every time you bang that drum.
And I think the awareness is out there now. And the floss and toss is definitely something worth fighting against. I'm tired of seeing those flossing devices just thrown all over the place. Barbarians all over Western New York and beyond. But I think this is the crusade that we really need to get behind. The sticky. So how do you prevent the deplaning budger? It's the same thing somebody taught me in basketball. When you're playing defense in basketball and somebody's about to set a screen on you, you just stick your elbow out. You use your peripheral vision, stick your elbow out, and then when they're setting the screen, just kind of give a natural bump. Act like you're fighting through the screen, and you elbow them in the sternum, and hopefully you knock them out. Hopefully they hit the deck, and hopefully they don't do it again. Same deal here with the deplaning budger. Just flank out a wing, the elbow, and maybe you do it right before, because they're always itching, right?
Right.
They've got that. I gotta get off. I gotta get off.
You act like you're stretching. Oh,
yeah.
So,
or you just it's totally inadvertent, incidental. You don't know what you're doing. You live in a civilized society. The person behind you does not. So they just ram right into your elbow. It's on them. I did that once a couple years ago, some young punk, and hopefully he never did again. Which brings us to
Can you
Brian
tell
Flores'
that he
defense.
flew here and got up early in the morning and has been awake for
Oh
whatever
yeah,
14 hours since
it was
then?
definitely a set the alarm like I told you at 3:30 a.m. and you wake up 5 times thinking you're missing your alarm situation. But okay, that's a good segue. Let's start with the defense because I think we knew with Brian Flores that this was going to be an attacking, blitz heavy, chaotic defense that could just really wreak havoc. And he has his handpicked guys now. Andrew Van Ginkel, John Grenard. But what to you defensively? Let's just start there. We'll get to Sam Darnold, trust me. But what to you makes this the best defense in the NFL?
I just can't say enough how important it is that Brian Flores is a tremendous player evaluator. That they went out this offseason and they said, here are the players that we need in order for us to be great. Give them to us. Here's the shopping list. Go to the grocery store. And they were able to do that. Now, you can't do that if you keep Kirk Cousins. So this all does tie into salary cap space and cash that you have available to spend. That is a hugely important part of this story because you do not get Stephon Gilmore at the end of the offseason if you are having zero cap space because your quarterback is making $45 million. So that is where this begins of creating the best defense possible. But you also look at the Brian Flores tentacles. Andrew Van Ginkel has said before that he owes his career to Brian Flores. He was a 5th-round draft pick, and Flores turns him into this kind of versatile monster where he's rushing the passer, dropping back in coverage. He identifies those skills. And you'll hear a lot, we don't care where the player was drafted. We want to play the best 11. That is not always true, my friends. But Brian Flores, that's him. He identifies what guys do well. He puts them in the right positions, but also is so good at evaluating who can handle the mental load. That's another part of it as well. Blake Cashman is also a former 5th-round draft pick, not a superstar out of Minnesota here, but is such an experienced and smart player. And Van Ginkel, experienced and smart, versatile. And so he's been able to ask these guys, hey, would you guys mind all lining up at the line of scrimmage, then dropping back into many different coverages while making checks and changes at the line of scrimmage as the opposing offense is also shifting their protections and making their adjustments, reading that, putting it all in, communicating with each other, then not showing what coverage you're going to play, drop back into about 5-6 different coverages per game. Oh, yeah, by the way, can every single one of you blitz if I ask you to in a moment's notice? And the answer is yes, because they have so many experienced players. That's what it comes down to. Everyone loves these young teams. Oh, boy, have you heard their draft picks are playing? That's great, but you can't put as much onto those guys' plates as you can a Stephon Gilmore, a Harrison Smith, a Blake Cashman, Harrison Phillips. These guys have all been around. So this is essentially allowing him to use every bit of his big giant football brain and his playbook that he's laid out for them. And I asked Blake Cashman about it, and he said when you get the game plan, when you arrive here on Wednesday morning, you're like, okay, there's a lot here. But these guys know how to work through it. They know how to learn. They know how to retain the information. And most of all, if you've been in the league for a while, you know how to communicate with each other. So you see something, you look it back at the coverage. All right, here's what we're checking to. You look at the front 7, make a call, make a signal. Here's where we're rushing from. And you saw it in the Jets game. There's a great breakdown by, I think it was Colt McCoy on YouTube, where he was talking about the Vikings seeing the Jets signal to a certain protection from the center, like holding up his hands, giving a signal, and then they changed it to rush from the other side. Free runner at Aaron Rodgers blows up a 3rd down. You can't just do this stuff. You have to have the personnel to do it. So I think this is the melding of a brilliant defensive mind with all the players that can execute what he wants to do.
And when you dissect it like that, and you think about a Brian Flores defense, and you think about chaos and confusion, I feel like this magnetic pull to, oh no, Rex Ryan, 2015, 2016. Oh no, now his twin brother's with him. Oh no, there's players running on the field, off the field, and they don't have enough players on the field to stop. I think it was Jay Ajayi for the Dolphins, where they had 10 guys on the field. when they gave up 1 million rushing yards to the Dolphins at home. It was awful. I mean, Preston Brown, he came on one of our happy hours. He just said how miserable it was schematically to keep up, but it's not that as well. I mean, I remember Harrison Smith telling me in training camp, those joints with the Browns. Yes, it's complicated, but the players have a lot of control too. If it's ever too complicated in the moment, if they ever feel too overwhelmed, he said that they can kind of default to something they're comfortable with. They've got the power at the end of the day on the field to run the coverage, run the blitz, run the plays that they want to, right? Do you get that sense too? It's still very players have the power. You know, with Rex, it was not that.
Correct, right. And that's a really important part of this is when you have these veteran players, they can communicate with Brian Flores, and he is willing to listen. I don't know how he's dealt with previous quarterbacks who didn't seem to enjoy the experience. I know how he's dealt with people here, though, which is to create this collaborative defense where you have Harrison Smith almost as an assistant coach, Blake Cashman, Jonathan Grenard. These guys are such intelligent football players. Phillips, the same thing, that he can say, hey guys, what if we asked you to do this against a certain look? And Harrison Smith might be like, I think that's a lot. And then he'll say, okay, we won't do it. And he can also say, in the moment, I don't even have to send you a call. You will know the call. And I send in a play call, but Blake Cashman, you can look at the offense and be like, no, this is too much. Let's change it. Or this isn't going to work. Let's change it. And once everybody's on the same page and also feels like they have ownership of this thing, where it isn't just a run the defense. And Gilmore said this to me. He said that some defensive coordinators will just say, here's the play, make them beat it. That's not how they're doing it here. It's so much more of this amoeba, this like moving target for offenses. And you go, how are you supposed to game plan for it? Because this was always the Belichick thing back in the day, and I'm sure Flores took it, is if every week is a different looking defense almost entirely because of all the shape shifts they can do, how do you game plan for it? What weaknesses do you try to identify when that might not even be the coverage they play? It might be one week, oh man, they're playing all this cover 4. Next week, it's running Tampa 2 out of a mug look. Next week, there's just so many different things that they've been able to do. And each week, it feels like it has been different. And even last year, it was kind of out of necessity, mash the blitz button. Just blitz. We can't rush the passer with 4. Just blitz. That's been very different this year because you have Grenard, you have Van Ginkel, you have more guys mixing and matching that can rush without having to just blitz all the time. So some weeks there's been 50, 60% blitzing. Some weeks it's been like 20%, and it's totally different. So as the Detroit Lions arrive here, they don't know exactly what they're going to see in Flores' defense, and there is a lot of value in that.
And you can keep your identity too. It's not like they are masquerading week to week, being somebody they're not either. They still do have this identity as this kind of like amoeba defense. It's going to throw different stuff at you because you have strange players for a strange scheme. And Van Ginkel, I can't think of another player really like him in the NFL who can set the edge and rush and drop. And it's the perfect player to have on the pick 6 from Aaron Rodgers, where, I mean, Aaron doesn't even see him. I mean, I've covered this guy most of his career. I can't think of many plays where Aaron Rodgers is seeing ghosts.
If I remember right, there's some crazy pick 6 stat with Rodgers where he's had like 3 of them in his entire career. So that was nuts. The thing with Van Ginkel is he grew up I shouldn't say most, but a lot of these guys grow up in Florida in big schools, or they go to prep schools, and like this is how the elite athlete world works these days. Even if you're a kicker with Will Reichard, by the time you're in 6th grade, you're in like kicking camps and all stuff like that. Andrew Van Ginkel grew up in a town that was very small, where he played every single position in high school and was by far the best player out there. But he was playing receiver, punt returner, punter, quarterback, edge rusher. And I think that just shaped his view of football. I mean, think about how fast Aaron Rodgers threw that football. I mean, how many edge rushers catch that football? But this guy grew up playing receiver, so he's able to do it. And I think that a piece like that, he's been the one that's moved this defense over the top to be excellent and terrifying, as opposed to, I think they would have been good otherwise, but with that piece where you go into an alignment and you go, all right, he looks like an edge rusher, he looks like a Mike linebacker, he looks like a defensive tackle somehow, where is he going to end up? And there's even plays where he's created pressure. He is a wide 9 edge rusher and somehow comes up right in the middle, like, because he loops all the way around, but he's got this bendiness to him, this flexibility where he can get in there quick. And you just like, how did this man arrive here? You have to go back and look at the tape to go, wait, I thought I saw him line up over there. Now he's rushing up the middle. What the heck? And the same thing for that interception. He's lined up as an edge rusher, and all of a sudden he's, what do they call that? The flat defender. I mean, like, what the heck? How did he just even get there? So it's been fascinating to see him play. Probably the most underrated player in the NFL.
Agreed.
Before he got here, maybe getting a little more shine these days. But I think he's always been this guy. But it's just been with Miami. They weren't that relevant. And then when they were, Mike McDaniel was the one that got talked about the most, and not really their defensive players. So it really is, though, when they say it's the biggest cliche in football, but Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's, it's like, you can only do as much as your players will allow. But if you have a guy like him, you could do everything.
One more on Flores and the defense, because I got to get to quarterback, obviously. And what Sam Darnold's doing is unbelievable. But when Brian Flores was hired, my mind went to, okay, how is this going to work with Kevin O'Connell, right? Two very different coaching styles in theory. I mean, going from Mike Zimmer to Kevin O'Connell, we've been writing ad nauseum about that, what life was like for players under Zimmer here, what it would be under O'Connell. Night and day. They said it was night and day from day one. What players said about Brian Flores in Miami, not very flattering. I spent some time down there in Miami for a Tua series a few years back, and they didn't hold back either. But we can say it now, he's exactly what the defense needed. You know, Harrison Phillips, I can remember him last year in training camp. We were talking about moving from Ed Donatel to Flores, and he said, we're winning all these one-score games. There was 11 one-score games. And we get in that film room and we're not really addressing what needs to be addressed. There wasn't that accountability. We let a lot kind of slide because it was such a thrilling win, and we're not letting stuff slide now. But it is like a fine line with the modern athlete. You can't go full Zim. And maybe Flores learned. Does he sound like a coach who's learned how to kind of work with the modern athlete? And maybe part of it is his coaching style is best served as a defensive coordinator at this point in time too. I guess I'm assuming he also wants to become a head coach again. How is this all kind of blended together so well when it could have blown up with what players said down in Miami?
Yeah, with one thing is, I don't know how many modern athletes they really have playing for them right now. I mean, when you look at it, it's like Harrison Smith, 35. The same for Stephon Gilmore. Grenard is in his late 20s. Van Ginkel's in his late 20s. Cashman is in his late 20s.
That's a great point.
All these guys have been around, and they are not the 20 or 21-year-old player. And Ivan Pace is a throwback. That dude could have played in 1961, 1981, 2001. It doesn't matter. Like, he's just a single-minded football, go-get-ball type of player. And I think that finding the right group of characters to fit his personality has been really important, and high IQ, but also a little crazy. And I mean this in the most complimentary way. The best defensive players are often kind of insane. Like, I mean, Harrison Smith's a psychopath. Like, he just is. Why is he still playing? Like, he's earned so much money. And everyone thought this team was going to win 6 games, and the dude does all this crazy stuff off
torture chambers.
Yeah, right. To stay, but he is so in love with this game, so obsessed with this game, and I think that's Flores, so competitive, so deep in this thing that I don't think you have too many guys here who are going, well, I didn't get the right number of snaps or something. You just don't have too many me guys. There's also a lot of money on that side of the field, which I think when you have a big contract, it's like, I'm here to earn that. I'm a pro, and I'm going to, do what needs to be done here. But the other thing is people are complicated. Like, it's not as simple as, well, Flores was didn't get along here under these circumstances, so that's just who he is. Well, first-time head coach, We know all those guys under Belichick trying to emulate Belichick. It's not really a good idea. You come here, and sometimes you are influenced by your friends. You started a Substack in part because your friend, me, said, hey, man, this could work for you. Kevin O'Connell and his culture and the way that he has built this thing, combined with the intensity of Flores, but also smoothed over, I think, a little bit of, hey, like, this is a player's type of culture. It's a player-led type of culture, and that's how we're going to do things here. I think they see the game aggressively as far as X's and O's, so they really match up there. But I also think that they've worked off each other a little bit to where maybe O'Connell is a little more comfortable bringing out his edginess because of Flores. And maybe Flores is a little bit like, I don't have to put the hammer down on these guys the same way that I may have done in Miami because I've learned from the way Kevin O'Connell speaks to the team. And I just think anytime with the head coach, that guy sets the tone for the entire organization, and it all starts with him. And if there's something that's not right in terms of how players are being treated or something, that the head coach will make a change there, right? And so I think with O'Connell and Flores, they've kind of been the perfect yin and yang for each other to complement each other's personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. And it's just worked. I mean, this organization going in the right direction. If you were going to look for like a big bang type of moment, it's hiring Brian Flores. It really is. Because now I think they have the best coaching combination in the entire NFL.
Just made a great point too. I mean, having two different personalities is such a benefit. I mean, they're going to make each other better. You know what I mean? Flores is going to be good for O'Connell. O'Connell is going to be good for Flores. I'm just thinking of what Jerry Jones was saying on the radio down there in Dallas, where he's just ripping those radio hosts and threatening to fire them. And then he talked to Diana Rossini at The Athletic. He's like, well, I'm paraphrasing. What pissed me off is I'm paying them. You know, I don't need to take that from them. I can fire them. Well, just he kind of said the quiet part out loud. He prefers to surround himself with yes men.
Right.
I'm just picturing Jerry Jones only being incubated and insulated by people who are telling Jerry Jones exactly what he wants to hear at all times. The best teams are going to have people who challenge each other behind the scenes. Maybe that's what's going on here to a certain extent. You know what's crazy though, Matt, is I don't interrupt you if you want to keep going.
There's another part that's important here too, is that the owners let the football dudes do the football stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you just can't say it enough that if you have owners that are largely back off and they are the money people, and of course you're going to run things by them and they're going to set the entire organization and okay, do we want to tank or not, which this team did not want to tank a couple of years ago. That's going to be an ownership decision, but at the same time, or move on from Kirk Cousins. But they listened to them to move on from Cousins. And he's been good in Atlanta. That was a great situation for him. All's well that ends well for both sides. But it was really important that this team became about Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores and what they were doing and building, and not sort of this marriage between O'Connell and Kirk Cousins. And also allowing O'Connell to pick his future quarterback is really important as well. And even O'Connell to play a role, because you want to talk about Darnold. O'Connell was the one who said, I want Sam Darnold. He was familiar with him. He was familiar with Kyle Shanahan. He had scouted him when he came out of the draft. He didn't want Ryan Tannehill, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew. He wanted somebody that he could try to get his hands on and mold. That's been another big part of their success too. So that's where it comes back to the coaches having power, them being good at their jobs, dictating a lot of the personnel stuff. It's all been a very good operation here to get to 5-0.
The best owners spend money and get the hell out of the way. Where we're sitting right now, this TCO Performance Center, this is, I'm not just saying this because I'm sitting
insane.
Here. It is the best facility in the NFL. And I don't even think it's close. I've traveled around, I don't know, 6 or 7 different places since June, and it blows me away every time I come here. So yeah, that's what the Wilps do. They will spend money, and then they'll let football people make football decisions, which brings us to the decision that shaped the Vikings as we see them right now. I'm just thinking back to the Combine. I'm sitting down with Terry Fontenot, Falcons GM, downtown Indianapolis. He's just got the biggest grin on his face. Just cannot wait for free agency, cannot wait for the draft. they too have an owner that spends money and is going to get out of the way. He was grabbing Skittles and saying, "Hey, if I tell Arthur Blank," I almost said Arthur Smith, Arthur Blank, like, "Mr. Blank, this bag of Skittles will help us win a Super Bowl." He'll say, "Do whatever you need to do." But now we know that the Falcons were in an all-out blitz for Kirk Cousins via tampering.
Yes,
penalty, a little bit.
First tampering ever, I think. Yeah.
First one. Exactly. First one.
First time anyone's ever tampered.
Nobody tampers at the combine. We know that. We see it. Nobody's talking to anybody there at Prime 47. So they get their. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the best businessman to ever play the position with what he's been able to earn throughout his career. But let's say, I mean, the Vikings wanted Kirk Cousins, right? They made a competitive offer. Like, did they want? How badly did they really want him?
I think that the Vikings, if they could have brought back Kirk Cousins at $25 to $30 million a year for 2 years, and they could get out of it after one. And I don't know exactly what their offer was, so I'm not saying that that's like reporting what their number was. And I went extremely low, but let's just make it extremely low for the guaranteed dollars. If they could have done it for 60 million, 50 million guaranteed over 2 years, they could get out of it after one and still draft their quarterback. I think they would have done it because they knew that this team could be pretty good if they got the right players in free agency. I also think that they fully understood someone else was going to go crazier and he was going to leave. I don't think that they ever truly believed that Kirk Cousins was going to come back. They might say that. I'm sure everybody on the record would say, no, we wanted Kirk back. We loved him, all that stuff. But in the front office, if you're pulling out the ledger and you're looking at how different that is when you can sign a Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman. I mean, those are 3 day one free agents. Do you know how many day one free agents they signed while Kirk was here? The answer is 0. They never signed any. I mean, they signed Michael Pierce. They signed Delvin Tomlinson. Those are like second week type of free agent. I believe the most free agency dollars they ever spent in terms of total contract was Michael Pierce. And he was here for a year. I mean, 2 years technically, but he didn't play during COVID. I mean, they could not spend. And then now he goes away and JJ McCarthy's going to make what, like $6 million or something next year. I mean, this gap between the rookie contracts and the veteran quarterbacks has just grown and grown and grown. And when you look at that draft, where they really kind of showed their cards is after they drafted McCarthy, they said, oh yeah, we were looking at this draft for a couple of years now. And you're like, oh, were you? Interesting that you didn't extend Kirk very long and you were looking at this draft, but it really sounds like you wanted Kirk back. I mean, it doesn't really. I think that O'Connell had a great relationship with Kirk so that they wanted to never make it seem like we want him gone or we hate him or anything like that. There's just no way around it. This was a better move. And then I know that McCarthy's not going to play this year, but by the time he was getting close, it was looking like this wasn't just a good decision. This was a franchise-shifting decision that could change the trajectory to make this team a Super Bowl caliber type of competitor for years to come, because I know he hasn't played yet, so people haven't seen him like I've seen him in training camp with McCarthy. They only saw the one preseason game. That's very real. Like them thinking that he's their franchise quarterback is very, very real. And his development, how fast it was during the offseason, blew my mind. I've never seen anything like it. So, I mean, I think that what this team did in making that Kirk decision to move on from him, bring in Darnold to pair with McCarthy was the best thing that this team has done in a very, very long time.
I bet you there's some fans of teams listening to this podcast right now thinking, okay, that seems like a good way to build a football team instead of spending 55, 56, 57 million a year because your quarterback's next in line. I mean, what are the Jaguars going to do? Ooh, I mean, what are the Dolphins going to do with Tua's brain situation? Remains to be seen. There's every team is different, every front office is different, but this would seem to be an ideal path to take. If you can draft a quarterback, that quarterback, by all accounts, is on the right track, once he gets past this injury, and the reclamation project that is Sam Darnold, and you can sign whoever you want on defense for a coordinator like Brian Flores, and you re-sign Justin Jefferson, You lock up the 2 tackles. You get Aaron Jones, who's hungry as hell. If you're not going to just hand a quarterback a blank check, this is a pretty damn good way to build a team.
And I will acknowledge that we're always trying to take one team's success and say, well, this is the model. This is what you should do. And it probably is overall. But how often do you run yourself into a Sam Darnold situation where a guy has bounced around, struggled, and then it does click for him? I think that it was pretty exceptional how bad his previous teams were. I mean, you have to be, how many guys have ever been dropped into spots that bad who actually hang around? A lot of times that guy's out of the league by now, and they don't get that opportunity to be with Kyle Shanahan on a team that goes to the Super Bowl. Mm. And even with the defensive players, it's like, well, yeah, you could spend a bunch of money on defense. How many times do all the free agents click? Not that often, right? So I think it's been one of those type of rare situations where everything has come to fruition. But it reminds me of what Philadelphia did around Jalen Hurts and what San Francisco has done around Brock Purdy. That those are 2 good quarterbacks, but they have just stacked up with the money they've spent. They've traded draft picks to put guys around them. It's not an easy path to take, the competitive rebuild, as they called it, but they've been able to pull it off to be here. And of course, they don't have any rings yet. This team, in my first year covering the team, went 5-0 and then missed the playoffs. So they're not there yet. It was one of
we can just blame you if this thing falls apart now for verbalizing that.
Well, it's also true that the Bills, every year I was in Buffalo, missed the playoffs. And then as soon as I left, they got Josh Allen, and, here we are. So it may be connected to me. I'm not 100% sure. I was here for the Minneapolis Miracle, though. That has to count for something.
Yeah, you were, and you weren't here when the Metrodome collapsed.
No, I was not. No, that was 2010. Yeah,
that was a little before your time. Sam Darnold, though, I mean, gosh, it's linking up with Kevin O'Connell and the way he designs plays, which is so innovative. It's, like you said, the rehab year with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. It's working with Jordan Palmer in the offseason. It's having Justin Jefferson at wide receiver. I'm sure we're all going to spend all season long trying to figure out why Sam Darnold is in the MVP conversation when basically everybody wrote him off as a bust several times over. Out of all of that, and I'm sure I missed some other factors, what to you is the number one reason we are completely rethinking the way we view Sam Darnold?
Well, I think that Kevin O'Connell has been given a ton of credit, and he deserves all of that credit. I would not take anything away from him. But what's sort of funny is the person who gets left out of the conversation about Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold. It's like, well, he's got Jefferson, and well, he's got O'Connell, and well, he's got Addison, and Hockenson coming back, and Aaron Jones. And look at all these things, and O'Connell's coach of the year, and all that stuff. And none of that's wrong. But I think what goes unsaid a little bit is when you get drafted number 3 overall and it doesn't work out, most of the time that guy never shows up again because it destroys their ego, it crushes their confidence, and sometimes they can't admit that it was even their fault. I mean, how many athletes have we seen that are bust that are like, well, it was the coaching. Well, it was something else. And with Sam Darnold, there has never been any excuse for what happened before. It's never like, well, yeah, they screwed me over and I'm here now. It's never been that attitude. And even with J.J. McCarthy, they draft him, and the first thing that they do is go on a golf trip together. Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall when he was here, they go on a golf trip. And it's like the way that he embraced J.J. McCarthy as well, but also competed in practice himself. And the way that O'Connell walked that tightrope with both quarterbacks was really, really something. But for him to have this kind of day in and day out, steady progress type of approach, worked his butt off to learn the offense. It's not an easy offense to learn, but he worked like crazy to master it by the end of training camp. And he comes out week 1, looks great. He's locked into it. He's running the operation. This guy's a pro, and his professionalism is not always something we see. You mentioned it's a me first kind of world. It's you see receivers, I'm only going to run a route at George Pickens as hard as I want if I'm going to get the ball. Like, okay, really, man? But you see that across everything. There's quarterbacks. I was listening to some podcast with Christian Hackenberg where he said, well, they didn't develop me enough or something. And you're like, okay, you got to earn that. I remember EJ Manuel was this way. Oh, well, it's Doug Marone's fault. No, it's not. No, it's not. And I think that Darnold has not blamed his past, has not come out and been like, oh, well, Adam Gase was terrible or something. And the door has been open for him 100 times by us. We're the worst when it comes to this. Darnold, come on, say it. You're playing the Jets this week. Don't you want to just tell them? Don't you just want to say, screw you, Jets? Nothing for that. Well, he said, well, there's a lot of things I could have done better there. And he left it at that and has gone on. So, I mean, all the things you're talking about. Plus, the other thing is, too, how often when you pick up a quarterback who's bounced around, does the guy have an absolute freaking cannon? It reminds me of Jeff George here. Because you usually...
I love all your Jeff George references, by the way.
I love Jeff George.
He's great that year.
One of my top 5 favorite quarterbacks to watch ever. Just gunning everywhere. And that's been Sam so far this year. He's just launching it down the field, trying to fit it into tight windows, making plays, using the cannon. It's not often you get a guy for $10 million as a free agent who can throw at a top 3 draft pick level. And Kevin O'Connell's had a lot of fun with that.
I love that answer. It reminds me of what Quincy Avery was just telling us a few weeks ago with Geno Smith. I mean, he is also kind of left astray, forgotten. Everybody else is defining Geno Smith, and behind the scenes, what's he doing? He's asking everybody, his coaches there in Seattle, Quincy, how can I get better? What can I do right now as a backup to Russell Wilson that nobody sees? It's going to change nobody's opinion of you. It's not going to do a thing to the narrative. And he worked himself into a new contract, a new situation, and is one of the better quarterbacks in football too. So I mean, just good old fashioned work ethic, I guess, and self belief. And everybody says block out the noise, but there is something to Sam Darnold. He cannot give a shit about anything that is said about him. Mm-hmm. He really can't.
Yeah,
because then you might get into that mode of blaming Adam Gase and blaming David Tepper and all of these people who deserve the blame. For sure, but how does that make you better as a quarterback if you're going to play the victim? That's what it is. He's not playing the victim when he could.
Matt Rule really to blame there, I think. In Carolina the most, but yeah, I think with Darnold, he's aware of all the things that have been said about him, and is just not going to allow that to seep in. And I think he has to also be the same way with the success as well. And this is what I'm curious about, because the last game and a half have been a little more shaky with Darnold, and we saw a little more of the old Sam Darnold's bad interception, a strip sack against Green Bay, and you go, okay, well, the turnovers, are you going to let that get in? But the thing that he has to deal with now is expectations, where now all of a sudden, hey, man, you're a Super Bowl team. Like, when you get to 5-0, the history of 5-0, aside from 2016 Vikings, is these are teams that are going deep in the playoffs, conference champions, reaching the Super Bowl. You are set up that well. The schedule is set up extremely well for this team. So now how do you, as Sam Darnold, balance the success? Because the first 3 games, what I thought was really special is that he was a game manager. And I mean that in the biggest complimentary way. Like, he didn't throw it into traffic. I believe he had 1 turnover-worthy play in the first 3 games. He's had 4 in the last 2 games, which is way too many. And I think that he was smart with the football. He threw it away when it wasn't there. He checked it down. And then, you get a little bit like, hey, everything's working for me. I'm going to push this ball into that tight window. He's still learning how to balance.
He needs some of that.
Yeah, right. Is Jefferson open, or can I just throw it to him anyway? Or should I maybe look somewhere else? And there's a lot of good talent here, but also you have to figure out how to distribute that. And, they're going to play a huge game against Detroit. What I've seen, though, that's been really impressive from Darnold is he's had a couple opportunities to totally melt, give away games, and he hasn't done it. He's come up with big drives at big times. And Aaron Jones was saying that in the huddle in Green Bay, when they really needed a big drive to put the game away, that Darnold said to them, like, if you're not sure, if anybody in this huddle is not sure about something, come to me. I've got the answer for you before any of these plays, because we need points. Like, that type of leadership from him is not always necessarily talked about with him because he's not the most vocal guy, I don't think. But he has shown like a leadership element, like in the moment type of thing that he was known for at USC, that I feel like that confidence is growing for him. So I'm fascinated to see where it goes because he still remains, after all those things I just said about him, he still remains the only X factor on this team. They've got everything else: defense, weapons. The offensive line has been really good this year. The coaching is really good. So it's kind of like, it's all there for you, buddy. Make it happen.
He's got a really good head of hair.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that hairline is really staying strong.
You and I are both going hats right now because your hair is gone.
Yeah.
But this right here,
Let's see.
Used to be
Let me take a look.
It used to be down here, and now it's...
Oh, no, you're still good.
It's fine, but it's...
Terrence wouldn't give you too much hell.
Right here, up here. Look, it's getting a little...
You're fine. You're fine.
But it's getting lighter. It's right here, up at the very top. It's getting a little lighter.
Well, if my good pal Terrence Newman was still around, I think he'd assess and say, stick with it.
I can't shave my head. I have a wrinkly head.
Really?
Yeah.
How can you tell underneath the hair?
I don't want you to like gently run your hands over my head because that's weird. But there's ridges. Do you remember Shane Battier?
Yes.
Basketball player. I have the same thing.
You've got a Shane Battier head.
I have a Shane Battier head. Can't shave it.
Can I just take another look real quick?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you can see it. You can see kind of like the...
I can't tell.
Yeah, you can't really tell. But if you want to touch it, you can touch it.
Let's see.
Yeah. See?
Oh,
you feel?
Yeah.
Okay. I told you.
Yeah, but maybe that will be in. Maybe you can make it in.
Freaks of nature are in.
Are you going to play victim or are you going to be Sam Darnold here? You know, right? Chart your own path. I don't know, something like that. That was excellent. Okay, a question you've entertained. Let's end with this. Let's say Sam Darnold goes out there, torches the Lions. This thing just keeps rolling. They're going to lose at some point, but they go 14-3, 13-4. Make the playoffs, win the division, win a playoff game or two.
I know where you're going with this.
I know, yeah. What are they going to do at quarterback long term? You know that those thoughts are dancing in the brains of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell.
I would say that the way they felt about J.J. McCarthy is very relevant here. That if Sam Darnold were to get them to the NFC Championship game, it's very hard to move on after that. If they're 14-3 and he's throwing 40 touchdowns and 9 picks and he's winning the MVP, okay. I don't think that's going to happen. But if they were able to get to that point, I think you have to franchise tag him or work out something short term. Anything short of that, I think they're moving on because it is a Alex Smith type of situation where Alex Smith was fantastic the year that they moved on from him and went to Mahomes, but they knew what they had in the player and they knew what they had in the coaching and they knew what they had in the supporting cast. And they believe that J.J. McCarthy can be even better than Sam Darnold. And that's with all compliments to Sam Darnold's play, but McCarthy showed them enough to believe that he's a franchise quarterback. And the thing is that the minute you start paying Darnold, you run into that same problem we're always talking about. Then he has to be that much better to make up for the fact that now you can't go sign a right guard. Now you can't go sign a defensive tackle to solidify the roster, or you got to let Cam Bynum go or something as opposed to keeping him around. And then you're just that much less the following season. And the other thing is, too, that I always think, if you chase what happened the previous year, we see this all the time, 2017 to 2018 Vikings, chasing what happened before by paying Kirk Cousins. Everything doesn't always align every single year. So you're going to have to be that much better. So I think that as much as they love Darnold, this is a J.J. McCarthy franchise going forward.
I like that answer a lot. We
it's
can
an interesting situation.
I mean, I'll drink the Sam Darnold Kool-Aid, and that Kool-Aid may be, 4.5 ABV, maybe 5 or 6, but JJ McCarthy might be original Four Loko, not the rebranded. You don't know what you have and what you saw. OTAs to training camp. I remember standing there at those Vikings Browns practices next to you, and you were hard to please. I mean, you cover this team extremely objectively with a critical eye, studying film. Again, everybody subscribe to Purple Insider for Matt's Substack, written content, and also his podcast is blowing up. But you said you were blown away, like you said here, by his improvement, his mechanics, his footwork, everything. I mean, just devastating timing for him on a personal level to have that torn meniscus when he did. But everything will reset. He'll rehab. He'll be back to where he was. You saw what kind of worker he was in that month to training camp. Imagine what he's going to do in the year 2.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was that everybody knows about J.J. McCarthy's character. It's what got him drafted. It's what Harbaugh loved about him so much. But what I think they didn't realize is that the kid was so young that he went from college to by the time he was at the end of training camp, I would guess he was 25 pounds heavier. And dude was throwing rockets. I mean, he was not talked about as a physical freak when he was coming out. And okay, is he Josh Allen? Maybe not, because he doesn't have that height. But his physical ability, I made the joke. Here, I'll give you a hot, it's only like tongue in cheek a little bit, but there's truth to it. To end the show, I said to my wife, they told us we were getting Matt Hasselbeck, and I think we got John Elway. Like, this is not what I was told by the draft analyst that this guy was going to be. Even the first day of minicamp, he came out throwing the ball. It's like, I have not seen velocity like that. He throws the ball at a similar velo of Sam Darnold, who is all about the arm. So, I mean, I just think that he grew so much so fast that you bet on the person, but what you saw is the raw tools. This is a 5-star IMG national champion in high school, national champion in the NFL, who has kind of brought that all together here. And also he's bought fully into O'Connell, like full in. Anything you say, yes, sir, kind of thing. Like they are tied at the hip for the future. So I don't think you could just put that aside. If I had seen any less than that, I might go, well, I don't know. But I think this is still a J.J. McCarthy team.
Man, that was fascinating. So much insight from our guy, Matthew Coller, right here. I can't wait to get in that Vikings locker room here momentarily.
We got to go.
And learn a little bit more. So make sure you read everything at golongtd.com. Also, Matt's work over at Purple Insider. We got to get in there, talk to some players. Thank you so much for listening to the Go Long Podcast.